Chavrutah, Joseph.
Shavuot, Rabbi David. I'm happy to be here with you.
Happy to be with you. Okay, so we are going to dive right in. We're going to learn Rav Kook, his Sefer Orot HaTshuva, which I think we could definitely say is his most important work of all his works. I think he believes that as well, as we'll see in his introduction. Rav Kook lived over 100 years ago and wrote this Sefer around 100 years ago in Eretz Yisrael. And it's really a culmination of his work in defining philosophy behind a lot of his Torah. So we're going to dig right in here. He has a little introduction, which really sums up the whole Sefer. So we'll just read it for face value, because I think it's important. Okay? So he says, Bezrat Hashem Yitbarach, Ze kama ni nilcham milchama pnimit v'ruach hazaka dochefet oti davar al hatshuva v'chol rayonti rak ba heim rukazim. For a long time, and how much am I fighting an inner war with myself, and I have a strong push that's pushing me to speak about tshuva. And all my thoughts, all my rayonot are about it, are centered around the concept of tshuva. As he says over here, what I mentioned too, it's the main part of what he thinks about in his writings, in his life, is to be about tshuva. And therefore, I think it's obviously, we're not just talking about the mitzvah you do on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur,
Right.
But it's a much greater topic, much deeper than anyone who hasn't learned the Sefer really knows. That tshuva really takes up all of life. It's not just something you do when you do an Aveira and you have to do tshuva.
Right.
What do you learn about tshuva? When do you do tshuva?
Right. So probably when I learned this book, it was eye-opening. First year in yeshiva, like you said, it gives a perspective on tshuva that paints the idea of moving forward in life in a godly way. Like the reason we're here is to move forward, and even if you didn't do something wrong, it doesn't mean you can't do tshuva, right? And also, tshuva is very psychological. There's a lot of mentality. If you get like a life coach or a coach in sports, right? Well, often there's a very big influence of mentality. So that is present in this book and in this learning that is also an eye-opening, because how you perceive yourself and your outlook, positive outlook, that's something that is integrated into tshuva and into our motivation to do good and be good people.
That's right. He continues, he says, Hatshuva tofeset at the chelek yoter gadol b'Torah u'v'chaim. Tshuva actually takes the biggest part of life and in Torah. It's not one of the 613, it actually surrounds and includes everything. Aleh b'niyot, upon tshuva is built, kol ha'tfikvot ha'ishiyut v'tziburit. Every hope we have as individuals and for the tzibur is built around tshuva. He mitzvah Hashem, it's a mitzvah. She mitzvah echad kalash b'kalot. It's the easiest of all the mitzvahs. Shari hir hor tshuva hukfar tshuva. Even just thinking about it, right? We know the Rambam speaks about 4 steps, or perhaps 5 steps of tshuva. But even just a little thought of tshuva, don't think that it's nothing. Even someone has a hir hur, to think maybe I should do some tshuva. I heard a mashal one time that with a hir hur sneaks in, just a little thought, it gets under enemy lines. When someone decides they want to make the change and want to grow, or as you said, develop and go forward in life, just thinking about it gets a very strong force that's going to start to grow under the enemy lines and really grow forward. So just a thought someone shouldn't put down and think that it's nothing. Well, he has a chapter of it later on. Mitzad sheni, harika shebekasha. It's actually the hardest mitzvah. Shlo yatsa dayin el poel. It hasn't actually come into fruition, into actualization, bimlo in its fullness, ba'olam v'chaim. What I believe it means here is that people don't really understand what it means in life or know what it is fully, really to get a hold of it, right? This is really the only sefer that I know that speaks about tshuva the way Rav Kook speaks about tshuva.
Okay, fine. So I understand the contrast now. Okay.
Very easy, but it's very difficult as well.
Right, meaning, it's easy because you can do it very easily, but on the other hand, actually following through and changing your life is very, very hard.
Right.
Right? So that...
And he also says that it's not something that the world knows about.
That reminds me of this crazy stat of how many people take the pills that the doctor tells them to take. Meaning so many people go to the doctor, and it's even for crazy things like for heart, the chance of getting a heart attack. A lot of people, after they have their first heart attack, or they're they have some sort of statistic of getting a heart attack, and they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, take this pill and it will drop your chances of getting a heart attack tremendously. And they find that a huge percentage of people just stop taking the pill, not because they don't believe that the doctor's right, but there's just some sort of barrier between the abstract desire and actually following through, right?
If you don't see it.
Exactly. Also, another
hard.
example is a marriage counselor, doctor who studied what brings healthy marriages and what causes healthy marriages. And also there he said that 50% of the people that come to him, they don't manage to follow through with the advice that they're given. Meaning a couple comes, they have lots of challenges, their marriage is not, they're both there because they believe that they need help. They go, they sit there, they're like, wow, we should do this. And then half of the people just don't follow through. And even though there's this desire in the beginning, there's still,
if you don't see the results right away, it's not so easy to keep following through with it.
Right. So that's why it's kal shebakalim, but also
it's very difficult.
Kashe shebakashat. Okay, so
he says here further, he says, I find myself, all I can do is speak about tshuva. There's so much written in the Torah, about tshuva. The prophets are always telling us to do tshuva. The Torah is full of us telling to do tshuva. But for our generation, it's still closed. What is tshuva, and it needs explanation. Hasifrut, literature, meaning writings that include, emotion and intellect. Hamshotetet, which spread out, b'chol hazaviot sheyesham shir v'chaim, which express song and life. Lo chadrat, it still hasn't gotten into klala toch otzar chaim anifla to this treasure of life called tshuva, this amazing thing. None of the Sifrut talks about it, of Orot HaTshuva, the treasure of tshuva. Be'emet lo hitchila klal itanyan bo. It's amazing, he says. The truth is, all this farm I've read, nobody's even dealt with it.
That's
really
crazy.
Looked into it.
It's crazy to say that.
It's a bold move, but Rav Kook is really he is a pioneer in what he's doing over here in the Sefer.
Yeah. And the confidence to feel that because he says all the Nevi'im speak about tshuva, and there's Rambam wrote about tshuva, and some of Chachmei Tzfat wrote about tshuva, and Rabbeinu Yonah wrote about tshuva. And
well, I don't, yeah, but I think for our generation, they didn't go into the depth of it. Maybe I think that the prophets kind of knew what it was, but no one from our generation has actually opened it up.
Right.
It's like the accordion, opening up the accordion for us to be able to understand it in a shaman type of way. I think Rav Kook says in his other sefarim as well that the Torah for the Galut is not the Torah for Eretz Yisrael. We're I think in Rizal, Chaim Vital writes that at the end of time, there's going to be otzrot of sod that are opened up, of secrets that are opened up for our generation, coming back to the light. And therefore, it was written, but it just hasn't been opened up yet for the public. And
100%.
Therefore, he wants to spend his time opening up for us what tshuva is, this great otzar that he can't stop talking about.
I want to say, for me, my motivation to sit here right now is exactly that. And I believe that of the Torah, the Eretz Yisrael, there's Gemara, Rabbi Zera, he came to Eretz Yisrael, he wanted to forget Torah Bavel when he came to Eretz Yisrael because it was holding him back from, and there's Avira Eretz Yisrael Machkim, in the Gemara, it's in multiple places. And that tfisa, that idea that Rav Kook, that's his motivation to feel that there's some depth of that.
Right. He speaks about the fact that there's something called mochem de katnut and mochem de gadlut, right? Kind of small mind and big mind. That we were, in the days of the Beit HaMikdash and the prophets, we had mochem de gadlut. In galut, we were like a young child. A young child, you just tell the child what to do. He puts his head down and he just does it. But when a child gets older and grows up and he's a state of gadlut, if you just tell him to do it without explaining and giving the depth and the reasoning, the child will rebel. He says a lot of rebellion happens in our generation now because we're back in Eretz Yisrael. We're at a time of gadlut, of greatness. And if we just put our heads down and just do what we're told like a child, there's going to be rebellion. And therefore, in our generation, we need to open up. We need to be treated as adults, mochem de gadlut, big brains, and explain the depth and the meaning behind things. It's kol hakavod. We're in the galut, in the exile. We needed to just keep our head down, do the mitzvah without understanding the sod and the depth behind everything being done. But now here in Eretz Yisrael, we need this new Torah, and that is where a lot of the rebellion is coming from in our generation, both in Chutz La'aretz and here, because we're ready for a new light of Mochen de Gadlut, maturity, explaining the reasons for things.
Amen.
So he says, Ladat et tchunat verko, we have to understand, like what it's made out of and its value. Afilu mitzad hapiuti, even understanding like in a poetic type of a way. And I think as we read Rav Kook, it's not your Mishnah Berurah where you study it for face value. A Rav Kook really speaks to your neshama. He's poetry, he's writing sifrut, he's writing it a way that you have to understand it when you read it with your neshama. You have to create, he calls it the power of dimyon and siyur, where it's not just his ratzon and seichel, where you have to be able to feel it almost in your neshama, what he's saying, and really try to create a vision of what he's speaking about.
Regesh is something that he put a big focus on also, like emotion. So you don't want to give up on the poetic side because you're diminishing, you're not using a tool that you have to connect to Hashem.
Right, it's one of our great kochot. So he says, but that hasn't been touched yet either. This poetic side, Shuma Lavev, because lein cheker, poetry and art, they're able to arouse things inside of a person which you can't necessarily do, on the superficial plane of things. V'kav v'chomer, how much more shlo nikfa etzba, even a small finger hasn't been raised. Adan ad davar tzido ma'asi, how to actually do it, like ma'asi, physically, how to go about doing tshuva. Especially especially with our new situation in life, that we have a country, that we are building here, a spiritual world within the physical world. We don't know how do we go about it. It's a new situation over here. Eretz Yisrael is a chiddush, and we are trying to, we haven't decided how do we do tshuva here in Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
He says, I am pushed miatzmuti, from my essence, apnimit, my inner essence, ledaber al davar tshuva. I have to speak about tshuva. V'nini slad, I'm like, on one hand, I don't feel comfortable about it. Batzmi machshvotai. Who am I? He says. Harui anochi. Could I speak ledaber al davar tshuva? Could I speak about tshuva? Kitvu al davar tshuva gdolei ador she'avaro. We have Rabbeinu Yon, many others who read the Mabit, who wrote books on tshuva, and the Nevi'im, Hachamim Yoter Torim. Chasidim yoter gdolim, great Chasidim. How can I come now and say this chiddush over here about tshuva? There's no weakness in the world, even this, what I'm afraid of to do, to be a pioneer over here, lepatreni, to say that I'm pater from doing what needs to be done, that I'm exempt from it, mitfiyat, what's being demanded of me from what I feel inside, pnimit. Muchrachani, I'm forced ledaber al davar tshuva. I need to get it out. The dafka b'tzida sifruti v'amasi, and specifically in the way of sifrut, through literature, the masi, and action, lahavanat, to understand the teichen shela b'dorenu, how we apply it in our generation, ulagshemata, and to fulfill it, to bring it to reality, b'chayim, in our lives, b'chaya prat, as for individuals, u'b'chaya klal, and for the tzibor, as we'll see that tshuva is something not only just for, it's split into three, for an individual, for the tzibor, and for the world as well. There's three types of tshuva we know. There's an individual, there's the tzibor, the Jewish people, and there's also the tshuva of the world itself. All three, Rav Kook will split up into ways of doing tshuva, and that is what he plans to do in this sefer.
Yeah, I think that something that everybody should feel responsibility for, we are living and always creating culture. And culture is the embodiment of values. And so a tzibur of a lot of people that are trying to push something, specific values into reality, that's creating a culture, creating a status quo of what's normal. That's related to tshuva also, meaning if we can slowly, on a family, on a community, as a city, like slowly build up our moral sensitivities towards doing good, so then the next generation that's built on top of it, they take those things for granted, but not in a negative sense, but rather now they can build the next step. And so that's also tshuva, like seeing ourselves as cultivating a certain culture that is positive and take certain things as like obvious, like we have to do this. This is the way it has to be. Feeling that responsibility to cultivate that culture with, meaning like whether it's our relationship with sports, with the physical world, with beauty, with music, creating certain music. Somebody in Israel right now who's a musician and is creating certain music, and right,
it creates our culture.
Yeah, he creates our culture, and it could be a part of the tshuva, of the klal. Like,
For sure. And it all is. I mean, I think throughout the Sefer we'll see that it's the financial markets, it's the literature, it's the poetry, it's the sport. It's all part of the tshuva process. There's nothing that's left out of it. Everything in this world, for mankind, the klal, and the individual, all of it's part of tshuva, the culture that you said we're creating over here. So the more we're tapped into it, understanding it properly, the more we'll build the culture properly with the proper tshuva, understanding its content. And as we see, Rav Kook explains how important this is in his introduction, how he needs to do it. He can't stop thinking about it all day long. It's like the most important thing. So I think it behooves us all to really try to understand what he wants to say. And
I'm very excited.
love this Sefer.
So that was the end of the introduction.